If you feel that things are constantly happening in your life and it feels more like you are a bystander rather than a main character, stick around because in this video, we're going to cover how to take more accountability in your life without making yourself feel awful about it. Hi, my name is Jimena Ramirez and I'm a behavior change coach, and I'm also the director of coaching and program strategy at Body Brain Alliance. Let me start with asking these simple questions. Do you actually feel like things are happening to you or that you're making things happen? This is about how much accountability do you think you're taking in your life for the outcomes that you're getting and for the outcomes that you want to create for yourself. Now, let's talk about accountability. Taking accountability for our life and for our reality means that we can acknowledge that our life is a reflection of the choices that we make. Now, I want to stop here and give a little disclaimer because this perspective of freedom and of making choices, this perspective of accountability and of responsibility does not apply to situations that involve any type of violence, coercion, or inequality. This is something that I think we are compelled to explain because in those situations, we have very little, if any, choice. Now that we have established that, let's talk about choices. A lot of times we feel like we have no choices available. And that is because we don't like the choices that we have available. So we first need to clarify that having choices doesn't mean that we're always going to have the choices that we want or deserve. Looking at this from a neutral perspective, what I'm saying is that we always have a choice. And even in some situations where we don't have a lot of control, we can control our mindset and our attitude. Those could be some of the choices that we have. When we can acknowledge and understand where we're at, we can trace back to some of the choices that have led to that outcome. So accountability is about recognizing that in every situation, we have a certain degree of control, even if it's not the areas that we would like to control. And in that area of control is where our choices lie. So taking accountability for your life means that you are willing and able to understand more about where you're at, trace things back without shame, without guilt. Those are extras that we don't really need in this situation to take accountability. And we can own up to understand how our choices have led us to create this outcome or this reality. Now, this part that I just mentioned is very, very important. Without the side of shame or guilt, a lot of times we avoid owning up to things and seeing things as a choice because we feel like in that process, we need to blame ourselves and go back to how we didn't make the right choice. However, compassionate accountability is about understanding that we simply made choices. Maybe in retrospect, we can acknowledge that they weren't helpful or they weren't really leading to our desired outcome. However, we don't need to get stuck in that position and think about what we should have done. Think about why we made a mistake. We can use that with neutrality to understand how to move forward. When we can acknowledge that, what we're doing here is we're taking responsibility. And this is what we call taking radical responsibility. It means fully acknowledging the choices that we have and the outcomes that we are creating. Now, how do we start working on change? Well, from that place of taking radical responsibility, from that place where we're no longer a bystander, things are not happening to us. We can acknowledge how there are things outside of our control that are happening, but we can also acknowledge that we have had a certain degree of control. We can acknowledge the choices that have gotten us here. And from there, we can ask ourselves, how do I feel about the outcomes that I'm getting? How do I feel about the choices that I'm making? What are the choices that are available to me? What were the choices that were available before? And here's what we can do to actually create change. We can ask ourselves, what can I do if I choose again? What can I choose to make some changes? This process of checking for alignment is what is actually going to get us unstuck. Because if I ask myself, how do I feel about the choices that I'm making? How do I feel about the outcomes that I'm creating? And I say, yeah, I feel great. Amazing. But if I don't feel great about those outcomes and those choices, then I get to choose again. There is so much power in choosing. And when I can start acknowledging my role in that, I can acknowledge that I'm the captain of my life. I can acknowledge that I'm steering the ship. Yes, maybe there are external sources that are having an impact on that. However, I can choose how I steer my ship. I can choose to change the course. I can choose again. So this means I don't need to sit in shame. I don't need to make myself feel terrible about the things that I chose before or how I got to this place. I can simply look back analyze, and make different choices from this compassionate perspective. This perspective where I understand that I made the best choices that I could with the information that I had or with the resources that I had, and now I get to choose again. To give an example of this, maybe we planned to do a couple of workouts last week, and then the kids were sick, and there were a lot of deadlines at work, and so no workouts got done. It would actually have been unreasonable to think that those workouts were going to happen as things kept popping up. Now, in all that chaos, what was in our control? On the one hand, maybe we can acknowledge, well, I could have gone for a run. I could have done a workout at home. Maybe there was something that I could have done. Maybe I did indeed fall into this all or nothing thinking where I gave myself no choices. And I can own up to how those choices have led to 0 workouts done at the end of the week. And maybe another choice I can make there is to be a little more flexible when it comes to what counts, to choose different thoughts, a different attitude, a different mindset. This is us acknowledging that something was in my control and I can make choices from that place. But maybe what was in my control was only acceptance. And maybe that is acceptance for how things happened. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of things out of my control. And even though the choices that I made, I can fully acknowledge they were not aligned with the outcome that I wanted to create, which was getting to the gym. The choices that I made were fully aligned with the values that I hold in my life. So they weren't aligned with those immediate outcomes, but they were aligned with the fact that my job really matters to me, taking care of my kids really matters to me, and that is a value that I was also living in. I can take responsibility for that, and I can say in this situation, the choices I made are not conducive to that outcome that I wanted to create, but they are conducive to creating the life that I want in the long term, because I was living in my values. I was taking care of my kids. I was actually fulfilling some duties for my job. Of course, this is not a situation where we want to fall into every single week, because otherwise we are not acknowledging that power that we have. But I'm talking about the situations where it feels like, well, what else could I have done? Was I going to leave my sick kids and not take care of them to go to the gym? No. But think about how, even in those situations, it feels like you are a bystander. Accountability can't exist if I feel powerless. And when we're thinking, I didn't have a choice, I can't leave my kids when they're sick, I can't not do my job, what we're telling ourselves is, I have no power, I have no choice, I have made none of those choices. When in fact, you have. What would it look like to actually acknowledge that without guilt or without shame, and actually acknowledging that this was the best call at that specific time? When that happens, when we're owning up to even the things that have led to an outcome that we didn't want, when we can see the glimpses of power that we've had in situations where we felt pretty powerless, we go from feeling angry and frustrated, and we go from this mindset of, why even try? Why even bother? If I couldn't control anything there, to, there is something that is within my control and I made a choice. And now that the situation has changed, I can choose again. Or now that I'm realizing that maybe I want to create a different result, I can have a more flexible mindset. We want to find that accountability in every space of our lives. We want to take back our power to choose. So how would it feel to, instead of thinking, I skipped the gym and I'm the worst, that you could actually think, I chose to take care of my kids and that is okay. I get to choose again this week or the next week. We want to reclaim our choices without judgment, because that is what actually allows us to choose again. So if you're thinking about reclaiming your choices, about bringing accountability into your life to live the life that you want, going from being a bystander to the main character in your story, things are not happening to you. You're making those things happen. We want to think about a couple of things. Number one, what is my desired outcome? What is it specifically that I like to achieve? And we can think about something for this week, for this day. Next, we want to list all the things that are in your control. All the things that your brain is going to tell you, you have no control over this, and the planning that you made is worthless. So we want to think about, well, what if the kids get sick? What if my partner doesn't have the time or the space to actually do this that they committed to? What if, right? All the things that could be out of our control, even things that are currently out there, things that are already present in our life that we can see could create obstacles. Now, we want to think about, what are some of the things that are within my control? For example, we can't control the weather if we're thinking about going for a walk, and that is our intention every day. But we can control making sure that we're checking the weather, making sure that we're planning to go on times when it's not going to be raining, making sure that we have adequate gear. What is within your control? And from there, what is one action that I'm committed to taking this week towards that outcome that I want to create? So life happens. and sometimes we don't get the choices that we would like to get. However, bringing back our focus to the things that we can control means that we are acknowledging that we are active participants in our life. And this means that we have the ability to create change. If you want to share anything about your experience with accountability, or if you use any of these tips and you find that helpful, we would love to know. Like or subscribe to our channel to see more of these videos. I will see you on our next video.